Good morning, friends. I'm Jim Lavender, pastor of Corinth United Methodist Church in the beautiful low hills of Goochland County, Virginia, where we all feel the sweet Virginia breeze. It's good to be with you this morning, and we're glad to have you. We're out here on the back part of our home overlooking Bear Creek Hollow Farm, and it's just a very pleasant day. I want to share with you today a message called Questions. And that involves the deepest questions that you have about the Lord, about the Scriptures, and about our life in eternity. It also involves the questions that God has for us. Many of them come directly from the Scriptures. It's going to be kind of a fun message. So I'd like to begin by asking you this one to get us started. Remember when your parents said, "Where are you?" They wanted to know where you were. And you would call back in your very young years and you would say, "Nowhere." And they would ask, "What are you doing?" And you would say, "Nothing." And sometimes that answer moved on into the teenage years, sometimes even into adulthood. And we respond by saying, "Nothing." But if we ever say, "I don't know," that's a red flag. One time God called out in the Garden of Eden, and he was talking to Adam and Eve, and he said, "Where are you?" And they didn't want to answer. They were hiding. And finally they emerged. And God said, "Why are you hiding?" You know, parents ask that question a lot too. But God said to this grown man and woman who had a mature relationship and everything was fine except that they had listened to the devil on one occasion. And as a result of that, their answer was a little bit comical to us, but it was pretty scary when you're talking to God and answering Him. They had said we were hiding because we were naked. And God came back with a classic question. Who told you that you were naked? And then they discovered that there was a snake involved. And you know that story and how that all happened. But questions are very important sentences. Our parents ask us, "Where are you?" They ask us, "What are you doing?" And they ask you, equally as important, "Where have you been?" You know how that sounds when they ask that question? Now, when a police officer asks that same question, "What are you doing?" "Where have you been?" and "Where are you?" if they can't see you. Those are heavier questions because they involve something that we have done or may have done that is not good. There are all kinds of questions that come in that manner. When the doctor says, "What seems to be the problem?" Or when a counselor or school teacher says that as well. What seems to be the problem? It doesn't imply that there is a problem. It doesn't imply what the problem may be. It doesn't imply what a diagnosis is. It simply is a professional saying to someone who is likely in need what seems to be the problem. There are some professionals, as well as parents and friends and spouses, who say, "Where does it hurt?" And that can mean a lot of different things. When God says it, it gets deeper. But answers always come. Now, there is a series of questions that journalists are supposed to ask when they are creating their work or assembling a story. And when you are putting out an advertisement, like in a newspaper or a magazine or something like that, these 6 magical questions are: who, what, why, where, when, and how much. Want to hear it again? Who, what, why, where, when, and how much. Those are classic questions, and people in journalism and people in advertising are supposed to know those by heart. And those questions must be asked before you can publish anything, or at least before you are supposed to publish anything. People want to know. You know that question, inquiring minds want to know. Well, if you're trying to sell something and you don't tell them where it is, how are they going to buy it? And if you can't describe what it is, I had somebody try to talk me into a pyramid one time. You know what pyramids, you've heard about those. And it was one of these stay-at-home, get-rich-quick things, and it really involved exploiting other people all the way down the line who didn't make as much as you did. And so I don't do that kind of stuff, and I don't recommend you do. But nonetheless, I kept asking, what are we selling? And do you know, that was 30 years ago. And to this day, I still don't know what we were supposed to be selling. We were just supposed to get a whole lot of people involved in it. There's something quite not right to me about that sort of thing. But who, what, why, when, where, and when, and how much, those are priceless. God knows the answer to those questions. In fact, He loves the answers to those questions if they honor His word. Now, I have made it my business as a pastor to ask people some questions that are really not invasive, but they are about trying to help people. And I frequently see somebody, particularly young people, young adults, and I always have this two-word question: how's life? And I'll leave it there. Sometimes I'll say, how's your life? How's your life going? And there are many things that flow forward in the way of answers, because it is not a judgmental question, because I'm smiling when I ask, how's life? Nice to see you. How's your life? And I have found that people love that question. They like to answer it, even if the answer involves problematic issues. It is an opening of a door to help people with whatever's happening in their lives. I had someone answer that who said, I'm pregnant. And typically, I get to say, that's the most exciting news I've heard this week. I'm so happy for you. But sometimes, the person who responds is not happy about that. Sometimes, there is no man in her life. And I respond to that by saying, how can I help? What can I do to help you? May I pray with you? But I'd like to do more than that. I'd like to help you work your way through this issue. Are there other people who know this? I don't need to know who they are. I'm just asking, are there other people? Sometimes, when I ask that question, a businessman will say, I'm losing my business. And I'll tell you right up front, pastors don't know much about business, but we do know about people. And I always say, please tell me how I can help you work your way through this problem. How's your life? How are things going? And sometimes, if I'm addressing a husband and wife together, or a young couple who are thinking about falling in love. And I ask that question, they look at one another and they don't say much. And that indicates there's some issues. They may or may not want my help, but there are some issues. And I need to be the best friend to them that I can possibly be. Now, friends, some people say, am I going to make it? And I don't know what that means. Now, if I'm at the edge of a hospital bed, I know what that means. But if it's out on the street and somebody just says, am I going to make it? They may be talking about, am I going to make it to heaven? Sometimes that is what they think. They may mean, am I going to make it through all the things the world is throwing at me? Everybody you see is carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. Now, friends, those questions are just tremendously important. Whether we are asking them or someone else is asking them. I remember that time when I was in the theater watching a movie and it was all about James Bond. Remember all that? And that was the rage of the world for a long, long time. And I remember one of those British Secret Service agents looking at Sean Connery on the screen playing 007, and he said, so 007, the world's in trouble, implying he was going to fix it. And he responded as only Sean Connery can. By the way, he's in his 90s doing well and exercising every day. Isn't that exciting for him? But he answered right back. He said, the world usually is in trouble, and walked away. And they played that cat and mouse game about how they get him involved in whatever the issue was. But the world is in trouble. And because the world is always in trouble, it always is, to one degree or another, it calls upon us. And sometimes we'd rather go the other way. Right now, many people do feel that way. We have economic issues, we have political issues, we have medical issues that are global in their impact, and we don't know how it was caused, and we don't exactly know the answer to all of it. We do know that we best not go out in public without something over our face. That's pretty important. It's one of the number one things. And don't touch anything that hasn't been cleansed and sterilized and so forth. Don't go anywhere you don't have to go, and for heaven's sakes, don't get into hugging people. Keep your distance. That is really, really important. At our little church, we marked with chalk on the floor grid, and you don't get out of your space. You gotta stay right there, and that's to save lives. And so these things really matter. Now let's get to this, can we? Parents and teachers and coaches and pastors have all these questions designed in advance to help you find answers to your problems. But what about the questions that God asks? In fact, Jesus in specific had several questions, many questions, about a half dozen of which I've written down and studied, and I want them to be part of this message. Jesus said to Peter, who do all those people say that I am? You know, he was doing a little raw market research. Jesus said to Peter, who do all those people say that I am? And he very honestly answered it. He said, some say you're Elijah. Some say you're John the Baptist. And then he had the big question. Simon Peter, who do you say that I am? And he said, thou art Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus responded to him, and he said, thou art Peter, and upon the rock of your faith, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Friends, those words still stand today. Jesus was profound with everything that he said. And because of that conversation, Peter is considered Saint Peter, who established what Jesus calls the church. There's another one, but before I get to that, I'd like to ask you, who do you really say that Jesus is? I can tell you all about what I say that he is, but I think you already know. What do you say? What do you say he is? And who do you say he is? And what does that mean to you? That's a profound question. And the answer to it is a choice on your part when it comes to faith. Faith is a choice, and you have to make that choice if you want faith. It is not anybody else's fault if you don't have faith. It's yours. So you have to make that choice. It's like being happy. You have to make the choice to be happy, or you won't be. Now there is a second one. Let me take a look at the notes here. Jesus was at Bethesda. There was a pool. Think of it as a hot tub that's a natural occurrence, and it has that jacuzzi thing going. Well, those occur in nature. And there was one at Bethesda, and people went there to get in the waters, and they found healing properties in those waters. And there was a man who was crippled for 30-some years, 38 years. He had been crippled and was seated there by the pool. He came every day, and he tried to get in the pool. But there were other people who jumped in front of him. Ever seen that happen before? Remember the lunch line when you were in elementary school? Well, there were those who jumped in front of him. And so, Jesus says, friend, why don't you get in the water? He said, I can't. You ever say, I can't? Well, Jesus says you can. Because he asked him a question, a very important question. Friend, friend, do you want to be well? Oh, yes, he did. And Jesus said, if you want to be well, rise up and walk. And by faith, that man stood, and he did walk. And he never touched the water. It's about faith and the power of the living Christ that makes the difference in your life. Jesus also said, friend, in a different setting, friend, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? There was a storm. The disciples were in a boat. They were all upset. And he said, why are you afraid? And he calmed the waters. What a great story. But it's about belief. It isn't about meteorology. It's not about the coming and going of the waves. It is about the faith of those who were afraid. I have to stop for a minute and tell you something personal. Friends, I don't know if you're among my close friends or if you're from far away. I don't know, but some of you don't know me really. I have had tremendous, over-the-top stage fright. I hardly talked to anybody until I was 17 years old. I did not like school. School for me was a living hell. That wasn't necessarily anybody else's fault. I suffered from 3 different learning disabilities. And they're still rolling around somewhere in my head, but I don't let them bother me anymore. And by a long series of events that I'm not going into right now, I found my first day of speaking in public to be on a stage in front of 2,500 people. I was horrified. And I had to dance around in a circle and have a beautiful young lady sitting up on my shoulder. It was part of the Lil Abner show, and I was paid to do that. And I had been told to go down on one knee. And when I did, that costume ripped all to pieces. And if you knew me, you'd understand why. But there I stood, humiliated, in front of all those people. And that's the day that I decided I didn't care what happened. I was going to make it. And I think all of us have to have that moment when we lose all confidence and then gain more than we thought we would ever have. And it isn't just about speaking in public, it's about whatever you're facing with your life. And so I want to offer you that in terms of faith. You may not know how to have faith. You may not want it. You may be engrossed in so many things that are eating away at your life that faith doesn't have a chance. So that would be a time to talk to the Lord, to answer some of the questions that He has to ask you. Jesus asked His disciples also, why do you doubt? You know, doubt is a choice too. You have to make your decision about whether you have the confidence and the faith in Him to do all things. And if you don't, you're in trouble. And there need to be some changes. Now, Jesus also said on another occasion, what do the Scriptures say? Right now, in the world you and I live in, that is a powerful question. There are so many applications that people are making, twisting the Scriptures around to accommodate what they think is their need. They is a very, very dangerous word, so I don't like to use it unless I know what I'm talking about. But I'm telling you, today, right now, many people ignore what the Scriptures have to say because it doesn't fit their convenience. That's a sad state of affairs. And Jesus says, what do the Scriptures say? Because they are quite clear about all the things that we face in our lives. On another occasion, Jesus, in the region of the Gerasenes, said, as a crowd gathered all around Him, they were pressing Him, they wanted to be close to Him. And it was known among the people that if you were able to reach out close enough and touch the fabric of Jesus' garment, you could be healed. And there was a woman who reached out and she touched just the hem of His garment, seeking healing. He did not see her. He did not know she was coming. He did not know that she had stepped away until he had that spiritual awareness, having not seen her. And he said out loud, "Who touched me?" And she said, "I did." And he said, "Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." That's powerful stuff, friends. If you want Christ enough to reach out to Him, you don't need to be touching anything tangible. Just reach out to Christ, and He will reach back to you. Always. He never fails. Never. Sometimes we don't care for the answers we get, but He always, always gives us answers. He heals us immediately, eventually, and eternally. All of those. You can't lose. I had to pray with a very dear friend who had passed away in our church, but before her death, I held her hand and I said, you know, she was all upset. And I said, the worst thing that can happen is you're going to go see Jesus. You are going to live forever. You're going to go to heaven. If that's the worst that can happen, it's going to be a better day, isn't it? And we agreed on that. And consequently, her service was beautiful. And her friends gathered around and her family gathered around. They were devastated. She was a beautiful young woman. How terrible. And then they realized the worst that can happen is you are going to meet Jesus face to face. That's the best news anybody can get. Friends, Jesus also was interested in your questions, and he was interested in his questions. And when you put the two together and you say to yourself, it hurts so bad. It may hurt physically, it may hurt spiritually, it may hurt emotionally. People hurt in many different kinds of ways. And so, you know, like when a child loses a puppy dog, that's horrible to a child. An adult understands, a child is not. And when they lose a dear, dear friend that they have played with for most of their life, and they look at you and they say, how do we get them to come back? And of course that can't happen. They need the comforting care of someone who sees the bigger picture and can say, it's all right. It's all right. Your puppy dog is running around in a place that we can't see. And maybe one day you'll see him there. That's the best thing to say. And eventually it will be all right. The who, what, why, when, and where of your life applied to the life of Jesus and what he had to say is incredibly important. Now, those of you who know my wife and I, you know us, and you know that for years and years we did a children's ministry that traveled all over the country, and volunteers from our church in Richmond, Virginia would go with us. And we had, let me tell you, we got stories to tell. But one day, you see, we used live animals to teach the gospel to children. The lion and the lamb. Love bears all things. And I had several different tigers, white tigers, gold tigers, all kinds of tigers. And I would do various things with them. And one of them was my wife would give them a baby bottle, even when they weighed hundreds of pounds. And they would reach way up in the air, higher than she could reach. And they would take that baby bottle from her. And it was all she could do to stand up with that thing's feet on her shoulders. And my thing with the tigers was I kissed tigers on the mouth, right slam on the mouth. And I would tell children, now don't you ever try this, because I know this tiger very, very well. But I'm kissing this tiger to teach you that God will be with you no matter who or what you will ever have to face. And so we did these kinds of things all over the country. Elephants, zebras, tigers, lions, giant rat that weighed 40 pounds. I mean, there's no end to it. And so 200 animals, almost 2 million children across a career. And so all that happening, and one day I had cause to have the cage with my big male tiger, whose name was Prince, on the back of my pickup truck, pulling a trailer. And we were headed north of Chicago up toward Wisconsin, and a police officer pulled me over, a state trooper. And his question was classic. He said, sir, do you know you have a tiger on your truck? And I said, yes, I do. Would you like to see the permit for it? He said, well, you got to have a permit. And I said, yes, sir, I'm very aware of that. And I said, I have medical papers on all my animals. I have the licenses for every town, city, county, province, state, everywhere I go. I've got a whole box full of permits. And I said, be happy for you to see him. He says, no, I don't want to see him. He says, I just want to know why you have him on your truck. And I had figured out by that time he was an okay kind of guy. You know, some people have this facade they put up that's all tough and all that, but he wasn't one of those. He was just a very nice guy. I assume he was somebody's granddaddy. And he says, well, why do you have a tiger on your truck? And I said, officer, he couldn't keep up, and I gave him a lift. And he began to laugh. He says, I bet you're a preacher, aren't you? And I said, yes, I am. And I explained to him what we were doing and all that, and he brought his kids to the program that night. But we have had some wild experiences answering questions for people in authority, but it is critically important that you do that with a degree of respect. But also, if you are talking to God, answer his questions well, because they are designed, all of his questions are designed to help you through your toughest times. That is my purpose as well for this little message, because I know somebody out there needs help. One day, a pickup truck pulled up in the parsonage yard, and a young man jumped out of that truck, and he came running up. He said, Dr. Jim. That's what kids call me, Dr. Jim. And so he says, Dr. Jim, I'm in trouble. And I said, well, hey man, let's get out of the public here and go in, sit down, get a cold drink, and talk about it. And so we did that. And I said, what seems to be the problem? Hear that? What seems to be the problem? So he gets to decide to tell me what the nature of the problem is. And so he said, I've done something terrible. And I said, well, there isn't anything that God won't forgive. And I think I can say there isn't much that I don't understand. So why don't we go for it? He said, I've been collecting dirty magazines for years. And this kid wasn't old enough to have been collecting them, but so many years. And he said, I just decided I didn't need that in my life anymore. And I said, well, man, I'm proud of you. And I said, we'll get through it. I said, what you gonna do? And he says, well, Pastor, he said, I knew you'd know what to do, so I just brought them all to you. And I said, well, I don't need them. And so I said, you know what? Just down the street, there's a dumpster. Why don't you and I, let's load them up and go down to the dumpster and just put them in there. And we did. We put a lot of them in there. Somebody drove by and said, Preacher, what are you doing? You moving? And I said, yeah, we're moving stuff like you can't imagine. And that was true. And we got them all out of sight. And today, that young man is a happy, stable, gospel-believing husband, father, and businessman. He made it just fine. And so far as I know, nobody else knows. That's what I want to leave you with. Some of the things going on in your life that you do not need to have there, nobody else has to know about unless they already do. And you can give most anything up to God if you are willing to answer the questions. May I pray with you? Gracious God, people have questions. Many of these listeners today have questions. God also has questions, and we'd like to answer those and do so faithfully. So would you hold us by the hand and help us through this day, the living of these days, and the facing of these hours. In the holy name of Jesus, amen. Friends, I hope these words have been of some help to you or someone you love. And I'm Jim Lavender, coming to you from Corinth United Methodist Church in the beautiful low hills of Goochland County, Virginia, where it's a wonderful, wonderful day. God bless you all. I hope you'll tune in and you'll listen to next week's message as well. pass these along to your friends. Tell them where they can find them. I'm on YouTube. I'm Jim Lavender. I'm the only character out there that's doing this particular type of work on YouTube with my name. And so I'll be back with you again next week. God bless you. Have a great day. See you soon.